The Aetheria Residences glittered with a manufactured opulence that James Cullen found both impressive and vaguely unsettling. Its polished chrome, shimmering glass, and meticulously manicured rooftop gardens spoke of absolute luxury, a stark contrast to the city's old, weathered brownstones that bordered its impressive height. Newly employed as a night concierge, James was more accustomed to the hushed anonymity of vast library stacks and the quiet hum of research than the gleaming, hushed whispers of the city's elite. He saw the Aetheria job as an escape, a chance for solitude and a steady income away from the demanding, often public, academic life he had recently abandoned. He pictured long, quiet nights, ample time for reading, and the simple satisfaction of a well-ordered desk. What the glossy brochures and the polite, distant HR manager had conveniently omitted, however, was a crucial detail. This architectural marvel, a beacon of modern prosperity, had risen directly from the leveled grounds of St. Jude's Hospital. St. Jude's had been an institution with a long and, as hushed whispers amongst the older city residents confirmed, a deeply troubled history. Tales of experimental procedures, unexplained disappearances, and a pervasive, lingering sorrow had clung to its old brick walls for decades before its demolition. Mr. Meist. Abernathy, the brisk, impeccably dressed building manager, had completed James's orientation. Abernathy was a man of sharp angles and tighter smiles, his movements precise, almost mechanical. He spoke in clipped, efficient sentences, radiating an aura of controlled formality. The bulk of the thick manual he handed James covered standard concierge duties, handling deliveries, managing resident access through a complex keycard system, coordinating guest arrivals, and responding to every conceivable resident request, from a misplaced car key to an emergency requiring immediate medical attention. But tucked away at the very end of the manual, printed on slightly yellowed, thinner paper, was a short, oddly specific list titled Night Protocol. Abernathy had glossed over it with disarming ease, his tight smile never faltering. Just standard after-hours procedures, James. Building security, privacy for our high-profile residents. Nothing to worry about. Utmost discretion, of course. The night protocol itself was brief, concise, and chillingly specific. After 2200 hours, never use elevator C to access the B1 level. If apartment 313 exhibits internal lights or sounds after midnight, do not approach or investigate. When the lobby phone rings between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not answer, regardless of how normal the call may seem. If a shadow moves on the fifth-floor security cameras when no personnel are present, cycle the system power and look away from the monitors for 1 minute. A specific silver amulet must always hang on the basement door. If it is missing, do not enter and report to management in the morning. James had initially found the list peculiar, perhaps an elaborate security measure or a quirk of the building's advanced, perhaps temperamental systems. He attributed the oddity to the eccentricities of a high-end establishment catering to individuals who valued their privacy to an extreme degree. Perhaps there was a faulty elevator, a reclusive resident in 313 who preferred not to be disturbed, or an old security system glitch triggered by certain light conditions. He certainly didn't dwell on the hushed whispers he'd inadvertently overheard from the daytime staff during a brief coffee break. Faint tales about strange occurrences after dark, about inexplicable cold spots in the corridors and fleeting figures, caught only in the periphery of vision. He dismissed them as office gossip, urban legends conjured to spice up mundane work. James needed the job. The pay was decent, and the nights, by all accounts, were supposed to be quiet, giving him ample time to delve into his academic texts, far from the pressures of his former life. His first few nights unfolded precisely as he had hoped. The residents were either out for the evening at exclusive galas or tucked away in their luxurious apartments, their presence marked only by the discreet glow of interior lights. The building hummed with the quiet, almost imperceptible efficiency of a perfectly well-maintained machine. The polished marble floors of the grand lobby reflected the ambient light, creating an atmosphere of serene, undisturbed order. James spent his time diligently organizing incoming deliveries, meticulously polishing the already gleaming reception desk, and making detailed notes on the residents' infrequent comings and goings. He even found a secluded, quiet corner behind the reception, a small alcove that offered a surprising degree of privacy, where he could delve into a well-worn copy of Poe's collected works, finding comfort in the structured dread of the written word. The vast, empty lobby often felt like his own private domain, a silent, gleaming fortress against the city outside. He reveled in the solitude, believing he had found his perfect haven. Then came the night when the elevator chime sang its tune just after 10 p.m. It was a single, clear note that cut through the lobby's quiet. A young woman, her expensive evening gown a crumpled mess, her hair disheveled, and her eyes wide with a raw primal panic, stumbled out of Elevator A. She rushed towards Elevator C, a desperate urgency in her movements as she repeatedly jabbed the down button. "-1, please," she exclaimed, her voice tight, strained with an almost manic insistence that sent a subtle shiver down James's spine. Her polished composure had completely dissolved, replaced by a frantic energy he found deeply unsettling. James, startled by her disarray, instinctively moved to assist. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but after 10 o'clock, Elevator C doesn't access the B1 level. It's a building policy." He offered a polite, apologetic smile, reciting the first item on the night protocol, a rule that now felt less arbitrary and more like a barrier. He expected a sigh of mild annoyance, perhaps a brief argument, but not the reaction he received. The woman spun around, her face paling further, her eyes fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. "But I left something important down there. I need to get it. It has to be tonight." Her desperation was palpable, radiating from her like heat. It was far beyond the typical frustration of a forgetful resident. It was a terror barely contained. "I understand," James replied, trying to maintain his calm professionalism. "But perhaps you could take Elevator A or B. The B1 level is still accessible through them," he offered, trying to be helpful, trying to find a logical solution to her illogical urgency. She shook her head vehemently, a wild tremor running through her. Her voice dropped to a frantic whisper. "No, it has to be C. Please, just this once?" "I can't explain, but it has to be C double quote." Her desperation was now edged with a strange, almost pleading fur. James hesitated. It seemed like such an arbitrary rule, restricting one specific elevator to one specific level after a certain hour. He had never fully understood it. But there was something in Mr. Abernathy's tone during the orientation, a subtle, almost imperceptible emphasis when he mentioned the night protocol, that gave James a profound pause. It wasn't just a policy, it felt like a warning. He imagined Abernathy's cold, granite eyes, his unyielding precision. "I'm truly sorry, ma'am," James stated, his voice firm despite the growing unease in his gut. "It's strictly against building policy. My instructions are quite clear." The woman's pleas grew more frantic, escalating into a quiet, almost tearful insistence. She begged, she reasoned, she even hinted at offering a substantial sum, but James stood firm, anchored by the inexplicable weight of the protocol. Eventually, with a frustrated, almost despairing sigh that seemed to echo in the vast lobby, she reluctantly turned and took Elevator A. As the gleaming doors of Elevator A slid shut, silencing her desperate pleas, James felt a prickle of profound unease. What was so important on the B1 level that required the specific use of Elevator C after hours? And why the restriction in the first place? It was the first undeniable whisper of strangeness in the Aetheria, a subtle, chilling crack in its polished, impenetrable facade. He looked at Elevator C, its doors closed and unmoving, and felt a cold premonition that his quiet nights were rapidly coming to an end. After 2200 hours, never use Elevator C to access the B1 level. The incident with the distressed resident in Elevator C gnawed at James. Building policy, Mr. Abernathy had said. But what kind of policy restricted access to a specific floor via a specific elevator after a certain hour, especially when other elevators still offered access to that same level? It felt less like a standard procedure and more like a deliberate attempt to cordon off something, to prevent access for a reason unspoken, a reason tinged with an unnerving mystery. James found himself subtly, discreetly inquiring with the daytime staff during shift change, dropping casual questions about the building's quirks. He gleaned fragmented answers, whispers of a service elevator that sometimes acted up, or residents who claimed to feel a chill when passing Elevator C after dark. No one offered any concrete explanations, only averted gazes and quick changes of subject. It solidified his suspicion that there was something known but not spoken about the Aetheria. The following night unfolded with its usual quiet hum, a deceptive calm that did little to soothe James's heightened senses. Just past midnight, as the digital clock on the reception desk clicked to 0005, James was making his routine rounds. He started with a sweep of the lobby and common areas, meticulously checking every detail, his flashlight beam cutting through the ambient dimness. As he turned down the third-floor hallway, a long carpeted corridor lined with expensive artwork and the discreet doors of opulent apartments, he noticed a faint, almost ethereal glow emanating from the frosted glass panel of apartment 313. The apartment was officially listed as unoccupied, undergoing extensive renovations according to the building's internal register. The exterior was shrouded in scaffolding, suggesting a deep, ongoing project. Yet a soft, warm light pulsed gently from within, casting subtle, dancing shadows on the plush hallway carpet. It wasn't the harsh, utilitarian glow of construction lights, but a soft, inviting radiance, almost like candlelight. Rule number 2 of the night protocol flashed in his mind with an almost physical jolt. If apartment 313 exhibits internal lights or sounds after midnight, do not approach or investigate. James froze mid-stride, his hand hovering over his radio. His first professional instinct was to report it immediately, to assume some kind of electrical malfunction, a fire hazard, or even an unauthorized entry by a squatter or a curious rogue construction worker. But the rule was unnervingly explicit. Do not approach or investigate. It wasn't report if observed. It was an outright, unequivocal instruction to ignore. He stood there for a long moment, the silence of the hallway amplifying the gentle, rhythmic throbbing of the light from behind the door. It wasn't harsh or glaring, but soft, almost alluring, beckoning him closer. Curiosity, a powerful and dangerous force in this environment, warred with the ingrained sense of duty and the unsettling, almost ominous specificity of the rule. What could possibly be happening in an unoccupied apartment that warranted such a peculiar, almost ritualistic instruction? The light seemed to pulse with a subtle, internal rhythm, as if it were breathing. Then he heard it. Faint at first, a delicate, almost musical sound, like the gentle, distant chiming of antique wind chimes or the ethereal tinkling of a piano played by unseen hands. It drifted from behind the door of 313, weaving through the soft light, creating an atmosphere that was both alluring and deeply strange, utterly out of place in the sterile luxury of the Aetheria. It wasn't loud or disruptive, but it had an ethereal, almost otherworldly quality that seemed to resonate with the profound stillness of the building, a melody that whispered of forgotten lullabies and unspoken grief. Despite the growing unease that crawled under his skin and the insistent curiosity that screamed for answers, James held his ground. He felt an inexplicable pull towards the light and the sound, a strange sense of familiarity, as if he recognized the tune from a distant, half-forgotten memory. But the rule was clear, a stark, unyielding barrier. He forced himself to physically turn away, continuing his rounds, his mind racing with unanswered questions that circled like vultures. Was the apartment truly unoccupied? If so, what was the source of the light and the haunting musical sounds? And why the explicit, almost desperate instruction to disregard it? The incident left him deeply unsettled, the Aetheria's polished facade now visibly cracked, revealing glimpses of a dark, unsettling truth beneath. Later that night, just as the digital clock on the reception desk ticked past 3 a.m., casting long, stark shadows across the gleaming marble, the lobby phone rang. It was a shrill, insistent sound that cut through the profound stillness of the early morning, jarring James from his quiet study of Poe. He instinctively reached for it, his years of professional training kicking in, his hand already anticipating the cool plastic of the receiver. But then, as his fingers brushed the phone, he remembered rule number 3. When the lobby phone rings between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not answer, regardless of how normal the call may seem. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the receiver, a mere inch from contact. The ringing continued, a persistent, almost demanding tone that seemed to vibrate in the very air around him. It sounded like a perfectly regular phone call, nothing unusual or urgent in its cadence, no static, no distortion, just the clear, steady ring of a normal line. It could be a resident with an emergency, a late arrival struggling to find the entrance, a confused delivery driver, or any number of legitimate reasons for a call that required his immediate attention. The instruction to not answer felt utterly counterintuitive to his role as the concierge, a direct violation of his basic responsibilities. The phone rang again, and again, its sound seeming to grow louder in the oppressive silence. James felt a growing internal conflict, a fierce battle between his professional duty and the inexplicable weight of the night protocol. What kind of luxury residence, he reasoned, had a policy of not answering the phone during certain hours, especially the early morning when emergencies were most likely to occur? It seemed unprofessional, negligent even, and completely out of character for a building of the Aetheria's supposed caliber. But the subtle emphasis Mr. Abernathy had placed on the night protocol, the almost ominous tone he imagined behind the printed words, held him back, rooting him to the spot. It felt like there was something profound hidden beneath the surface of the Aetheria's pristine exterior, something the management preferred to keep undisturbed, unheard, and unacknowledged during the late hours. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ringing stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy, echoing silence in its wake that seemed to throb in his ears. James let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his shoulders slumping slightly. He had followed the rule, but the unanswered call left a profound and lingering sense of unease. Who could have been calling at such an hour, with such persistence? And why was it so critically important not to answer? The Aetheria was slowly, terrifyingly, revealing its strange underbelly, a world of hidden rules and unseen forces. James felt like he was navigating a maze of unspoken secrets and peculiar instructions, each step pulling him deeper into a mystery he was not equipped to understand, yet was compelled to witness. The silence after the ringing ceased felt almost heavier than the ringing itself, pregnant with unseen intent. When the lobby phone rings between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not answer, regardless of how normal the call may seem. The unanswered phone call, resonating like a phantom vibration in the stillness of the lobby, settled like a cold knot in James's stomach. It gnawed at him, a constant reminder of the building's unspoken, unnerving truth. Every professional instinct screamed at him for his inaction, for neglecting what might have been a genuine emergency. A concierge who didn't answer the phone. It was an absurd concept, an egregious breach of duty. Yet, the more he replayed the events in his mind, the more the night protocol felt less like a set of bizarre, arbitrary rules and more like a series of ancient wards, designed to protect the very fabric of the building and its unsuspecting inhabitants from something unseen, something that stirred only during the darkest hours. The image of the phone, ringing insistently in the empty, polished lobby, haunted his thoughts. A few nights later, the oppressive quiet was broken only by the faint hum of the building's HVAC system. James was making his routine hourly check of the security camera feeds, a mundane task that usually involved nothing more than ensuring the corridors were clear and the fire exits were secure. The building was seemingly asleep, most residents presumably tucked away in their luxurious apartments, oblivious to the strange realities unfolding below. As he cycled through the cameras, his gaze sweeping across the various floors, the feed shifted to the 5th floor. It was a long, carpeted hallway, identical to many others, lined with expensive artwork and the discreet doors of opulent apartments. The lighting was dim, motion-activated sensors dormant, casting long, static shadows. And then he saw it. A fleeting shadow, tall and gaunt, flickered at the far end of the corridor, moving with an unnatural, almost liquid fluidity. It stretched and distorted against the pristine wall, elongated and too thin to be human. It moved without a visible source, no person or object casting it, flowing like spilled ink across the polished floor and up the wall. James's breath hitched in his throat. His blood ran cold. He double-checked the timestamp on the feed, 3:37 a.m. No cleaning crew was scheduled for this floor this hour. No residents were registered as being out and about. The hallway should have been utterly, undeniably empty. Rule number 4 of the night protocol immediately surfaced in his mind, stark and terrifying. If a shadow moves on the 5th floor security cameras when no personnel are present, cycle the system power and look away from the monitors for 1 minute. James's heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the monitoring station. His professional training urged him to investigate, to zoom in, to try and get a clearer view of the anomaly, to identify the intrusion. But the rule was chillingly specific, almost a desperate plea. Cycle the system power and look away. It wasn't investigate, it was react and disengage, a command to actively blind himself to whatever was unfolding. He reached for the main power switch for the security system, a large red button under a protective clear plastic cover. His hand trembled slightly, but he forced himself to act. With a hesitant, almost fearful breath, he flipped it. The monitors in front of him flickered, then went dark, plunging the small security room into a deeper gloom, illuminated only by the faint glow of indicator lights. He immediately turned his chair away from the blank screens, forcing his gaze to a framed print of a serene, idealized landscape on the opposite wall, a stark contrast to the unseen horror he had just witnessed. 1 minute. 60 long, silent seconds stretched out before him, each one feeling like an eternity. His mind raced, replaying the horrifying image of the shadow. What had he seen? A trick of the light? A subtle reflection from something outside? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the building's unsettling atmosphere? But the way it moved, the distorted, inhuman shape, it felt undeniably unnatural, a malevolent presence rather than an optical illusion. Why the specific instruction to cycle the power and look away? Was it to prevent whatever it was from being observed, as if observation itself granted it more power? Or was it to protect the observer, to keep him from seeing something that might be looking directly back through the cameras, directly into his eyes? The silence of the minute felt heavy, pregnant with unseen possibilities, filled with the phantom echo of the shadow's movement. When the minute was finally up, James reluctantly, cautiously, flipped the power back on. The monitors sprang to life with a soft hum, the fifth-floor hallway now appearing empty, bathed once more in the static, unremarkable glow of the night lights. There was no trace of the shadow. He immediately replayed the footage from the last few minutes, his fingers flying across the controls, his eyes desperately searching for any logical explanation. The shadow appeared once more, moved silently across a short section of the hallway, then paused, seemed to stretch, and vanished as inexplicably as it had arrived. There was no explanation for it, no logical source, no open doors, no movement of air, no light change. It was a pure anomaly. A cold dread, deeper and more profound than any he had felt before, seeped into James. The night protocol wasn't about faulty equipment, eccentric residents, or theatrical security measures. It was a set of active, desperate precautions against genuine, malevolent anomalies, against something that moved in the shadows when the rest of the Aetheria slept, utterly unseen by any living eye save for the electronic ones he controlled. The building wasn't just a luxury residence, it was a fragile container, a meticulously built trap, and the rules were explicitly in place to keep whatever was inside from fully manifesting or, perhaps, from noticing those who observed it. He now knew, with chilling certainty, that his role was not just concierge, but unwitting guardian, bound by rules he barely understood against horrors he could only glimpse. The shadow moves on the fifth-floor security cameras when no personnel are present, cycle the system power, and look away from the monitors for 1 minute. The incident with the fifth-floor shadow left James deeply unnerved. Each item on the night protocol now carried a weight of unspoken dread, transforming his mundane duties into a tightrope walk over an unseen abyss. The Aetheria wasn't just built on the site of an old hospital. It felt like it had somehow absorbed its lingering pain, its forgotten traumas, its final desperate breath. The polished surfaces and gleaming chrome seemed to merely be a thin veneer over something dark and ancient, a place where suffering still echoed. One of James's most consistent and, until now, uneventful tasks was a nightly check of the basement levels, primarily to ensure the proper functioning of the building's vast array of utilities, from the complex HVAC system to the intricate plumbing. The deepest basement level, B2, was a particularly unsettling place. It was a dimly lit, cavernous space, smelling perpetually of damp concrete, stale air, and the faint, metallic tang of old, forgotten pipes. It always felt significantly colder down there, a stark, unnatural contrast to the perfectly controlled climate of the luxurious upper floors. A few bare, flickering bulbs cast long, distorted shadows, making the towering storage rooms, ancient boilers, and forgotten maintenance equipment take on menacing, almost predatory shapes. The silence down here was different too, heavier, more profound, as if the very air absorbed all sound. As he descended the creaking metal stairs into the lower levels on his usual rounds, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, he immediately noticed something was amiss. Hanging on the heavy steel door that led to the deepest, most restricted part of the basement, a door he rarely had reason to open, secured with multiple deadbolts, was usually a small, intricately crafted silver amulet. It depicted what looked like intertwined roots or veins, a complex, almost organic pattern. James had always assumed it was some kind of arcane decorative piece, perhaps a relic left over from the hospital era, a superstitious item that survived the demolition. But tonight, the heavy, rusted hook above the door was empty. The silver amulet was gone. Rule number 5 of the night protocol slammed into his consciousness with the force of a physical blow. A specific silver amulet must always hang on the basement door. If it is missing, do not enter and report to management in the morning. James froze on the bottom step, his flashlight beam fixed, unwavering, on the bare, empty hook. A wave of icy dread, colder and more suffocating than the ambient basement air, washed over him, chilling him to the bone. His breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what the amulet did, what ancient power it held, or why its absence was so profoundly significant. But the unequivocal nature of the rule, the direct, unyielding instruction not to enter, spoke volumes. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an absolute, desperate warning. What horrifying presence lay beyond that door, a presence that required a silver ward to contain it? And what unspeakable consequences would unfold if that ward was now removed, if the containment was breached? An almost irresistible urge, a perverse, morbid curiosity, began to pull at him. He felt a powerful desire to open the door, to peer into the oppressive darkness beyond and satisfy his growing, terrifying need for answers. He wanted to know what secrets lay hidden, what terrors the management so desperately sought to contain. But the image of the gaunt shadow on the fifth-floor security monitor flashed vividly in his mind. The memory of the unanswered lobby phone ringing with an unseen voice in the dead of night. The strange, ethereal glow emanating from the supposedly empty apartment 313. Each inexplicable event, each bizarre rule, seemed to point to a horrifying, hidden reality within the Aetheria, a reality best left undisturbed, a slumbering horror best left to sleep. He backed away slowly from the door, his movements stiff, almost mechanical, keeping his flashlight beam trained steadfastly on the empty hook, as if the light itself could somehow restore the missing ward. The silence of the basement seemed to deepen, pressing in on him, becoming a tangible, suffocating weight. He imagined whatever the amulet was meant to contain, now potentially unrestrained, stirring, rising, lurking in the impenetrable darkness beyond the heavy steel door. He felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the unsettling, undeniable feeling of being watched, of being assessed from the unseen, abyssal depth. The very air around the door felt thicker, charged with a latent, malevolent energy that made his skin crawl. He retreated up the stairs, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, each step a desperate escape from the unseen. He wouldn't go past that door. He wouldn't violate the last, and perhaps the most significant rule. He would wait until morning and report the missing amulet to Mr. Abernathy, his mind already conjuring images of the manager's reaction. The tight smile, perhaps for the first time, replaced by a flicker of something else, something akin to raw, unadulterated fear or a grim, ancient resignation. The Aetheria Residences, James now knew with chilling certainty, was far more than just a luxury apartment complex. It was a meticulously constructed facade, a shimmering, modern tomb, hiding a history that was slowly, terrifyingly beginning to stir, to awaken. And he was caught in the middle, a night concierge with a set of strange rules and a growing, horrifying sense that he was working not in a building, but in a graveyard of slumber, where the dead were restless and the living were walking on very thin, breaking ice. He felt utterly alone, trapped between the gleaming silent floors and the unspeakable horrors below. A specific silver amulet must always hang on the basement door. If it is missing, do not enter and report to management in the morning.